I used to be ashamed of my past and unsure if I'd make it to where I was going. But I knew one thing was for certain. We don't end up where we're going on accident. I've also learned that we can't erase the past or hide from it, but we can learn from it and pass it on to others. So who am I? I'm the definition of a bootstrap girl. Someone who's made the hard choices to pick themselves back up and make something of themselves. And I'm not the only one. My name is Denisha. I'm a mom, a wife, a professor, advocate, queen of my own path, who's overcome abuse, foster care, homelessness, and raising 5 siblings on my own at the age of 24. And eventually I got a PhD. But something that I learned is that I don't know everything. So here on my show, we're going to be bringing in people who know the things that we don't know. Let's get in and learn on the Dr. Denisha Keating Show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Denisha Keating Show. I am super excited to have the Dr. Amanda with me, also a GCU alumni. That's where we both went to school. We have known each other through different Facebook groups, but we never actually got to meet. So this is really cool that we get to meet now on here. One of the things that we're going to be doing as we go through this show is we're going to be getting back to listening to understand. What we're doing is we're having a kitchen table conversation between two friends who are trying to understand each other and understand by asking questions. We're not going to fight. We're not going to yell. We're not going to scream. We're not going to talk over each other. But we're going to ask questions to understand and have a normal conversation that's back and forth. And the best part is we're inviting you to be the fly on the wall to see how we are going to manage various conversations. So today's topic is going to be a little bit more heavy. It is going to be talking about eating disorders. So this is a trigger warning just in case. We're not going to be deep diving into some of the things that might get, we're going to be mindful of that as we're going forward. But Amanda, I want you to take it off and I want you to just dig in with me and let's talk about this topic. This is, I think, a harder one for a lot of us to have, but I wanted to, I'm so grateful that you're willing to share and that we're able to have this conversation. So go ahead and take over.
Well, thank you so much, Nisha, for having me. I'm really happy to actually be talking about this. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And I would say it's something that a lot of people, struggle with, especially with having high standards and high expectations for ourselves. So for me, this is kind of something that started when I was about 15 years old. That's when I first wanted to go on a diet. And I would say it was around the time that I stopped getting taller. And so before, whenever I was getting taller, your weight goes up, but so does your height. And so I remember when I turned 15, that's kind of whenever I stopped growing. And then I noticed that one day I stepped on the scale and I was a few pounds higher than I felt comfortable being. And I was very big on basing my value on measurements. And I think that's something that a lot of people do that are like high academic, like people that really want to get good grades and everything like that. So when I was in high school, I was striving for the straight A's. If I got an A-, I would freak out. If I got like a B+, I'd freak out even more and be the end of the world. And I remember when I stepped on the scale that one day, I think that was a new measurement that I started to care about. And I remember talking to my dad and I was like, hey, I want to go on a diet. And then he was like, no, I'm not going to help you with that. And then I decided, okay, well, if my dad's not going to help me with it. I think I told my mom too. Neither of them wanted me to go on a diet. So they were just kind of like, no. But little did they know I was going to try to do it myself. And I didn't know what I was doing. So, and at that age, I don't think you should be going on a diet. But so I remember for me, it was, okay, let me try to eat less. And then so I would eat less. And then I would end up so hungry that I would end up like a few days later just binging on a bunch of food because I was hungry. Yeah. And then after a while, I realized, okay, it just kind of became a cycle of like I would starve myself not starve myself, but I would restrict for a few days. And then I would be so hungry that I would just eat everything.
Right.
And then I started to get more serious about it. So I remember it was my senior year of high school that I was severely restricting. And at the same time, I was also I was getting like all these, like the highest level grades in my class. And I was measuring my worth on that. So I was measuring my worth on grades and then weight. And then what it turned into is because I was restricting so much, I restricted I was doing cross country at the time. And so I remember I was running a lot and I was in varsity, so I was expected to run fast too. And I was able to go through the entire season. I didn't, it didn't affect my running as far as I know. But I do remember a second semester of senior year was when I was so hungry because I had been restricting for so long that I ended up binging probably thousands of calories within one sitting. And then I went to the bathroom and then I was trying to throw up. And it was my first, it wasn't my first time trying to throw up. I tried to do it before, but I remember I was so determined that time and I was able to do it. And I know when I threw up the first time, it was March of 2012. I don't remember the exact date, but I remember when I did it, I was thinking, okay, that's the last time, that's the one and only time I'm going to do it. And then it became a habit. It became something I would do every few weeks. And then eventually into my 20s, because this lasted for the, what it's called bulimia, where you binge and purge. It lasted 10 years. So it lasted from like age 17 to 28. And so it got pretty severe to the point where I was doing it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a while. And it was really hard to get out of. I did it throughout my bachelor's, my master's, and then halfway through my PhD program was when I was like, okay, it's time to make a change. But that's kind of the timeline of how that went about.
So I know one of the things that you were talking about when you said like you were trying to find perfection with grades, and then with this, with your weight, did doing this give you a sense of control, or what was it like what was going through your head when this was going down? Because I think a lot of people don't know why people eat and have eating disorders.
You know what's funny is that I feel like it was just so, like, for some reason I just came up with this fixed idea that, okay, this number is the one that I'm looking for when I step on the scale. So when I would step on the scale, if I saw that number was higher or lower, it didn't matter what I saw in the mirror. Like if I looked in the mirror and I thought, oh, I feel like I look good today, and then I stepped on the scale, I would let the scale change my mind. So I think it became like some sort of like mindset that I was just trained to have, because for some reason I just had it ingrained in me that, okay, you have to measure your worth somehow. Like I measured my worth on my grades. So if I didn't get that A, or if I didn't get if I didn't get top of the class, then I felt, okay, well, my value went down. Instead of thinking like, okay, because I've over time with therapy and everything, I realized that people aren't supposed to base their value on those kinds of things. It should be, okay, you're always worth it no matter what. But then that's kind of where the danger comes in. And I think it's something that I've noticed actually, that there were several friends that I knew that were kind of on the same boat as me, where they were very high academic achievers, and then they also had an eating disorder. And so I feel like that's something that kind of correlates. I'm not too sure, like, scientifically or anything like that. I haven't done too much.
We're gonna have to do some research on that, because I feel like I don't know. I know I also had an eating disorder, and that was built by what my parents would say. Like they would always say, like, a woman was, like, my dad would say, like, pretty women are women who have long hair and they are skinny. And both of my parents were significantly obese, so it was kind of interesting coming. Like, I mean, like, they were both over like 300 pounds, like not just a little bit. Like they were significantly obese, and when they would eat multiple plates at a time. So I definitely understand now that was coming from, their own body shame. Like they didn't feel good in their body. So they were just like, oh, pretty girls are skinny with long hair. And I'm like, okay. But then it started I used to be able to be like, whatever, like my parents are just saying what they're saying. But then when I was homeschooled before high school, and the very first week that I was in school for the very first time, I had been put into a public school, and this girl walked up to me, and I was wearing a Hawaiian punch shirt because I thought it was cute.
Yeah, it sounds cute.
I was like, it was a really cute shirt. I really liked it. And she walked up to me and she was like, just letting you know that boys are never gonna with that. Like, you're ugly and you're fat and you're this. And I was like, dang. And so I tried to like lose weight kind of the same way with, you know, I would stop eating for a few days, like literally stop eating and almost passed out a few times.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of food insecurities because of growing up in poverty. It was really hard, and being in foster care, like it was just one of those things that it's like I wouldn't eat for a few days because there was no food. And so then when I did eat, it was like I would literally get a pain in my chest if I felt like I was too heavy. I wouldn't even step on a scale. I would just be like, I'm too heavy today, I'm gonna skip that meal. And I'm like, and it was, I think for me, it was a sense of control of like the same thing. Like I was measuring my worth based off of what I looked like, because that was what it was reiterated over and over again, was that if you wanted to be wanted and you wanted to be worthy of being wanted, my grades were not the greatest. So it was like I wasn't thriving there, but it was the one thing I could control was how I looked.
Yeah.
And I think that really it comes down to sometimes we're like, well, this is the one thing I can control, or this is the thing that I can find my worth in. Yeah. And there's so many different factors, but it would be interesting to see, you know, because I was able to go on in my education and all that stuff, but I've always really struggled with my weight. And it really like the scale scares me. Now I'm like, cool, like I'm losing, like I'm in the process of losing weight right now, but not because I'm just trying to, it's not that I'm like, I'm too big. It's like, I just want to be able to move better. And I was over what I should be for my height, but I'm not focusing on a specific weight number. I'm just like, am I eating healthy? You know, am I getting enough protein? Am I hungry right now? I'm going to eat food, but I'm not going to go for a bag of chips. I'll do that every once in a while, but I'm not going to skip a meal. I'm going to eat something like oatmeal or cheese or have a protein shake or whatever. But I think sometimes there might be somebody listening who does have an eating disorder. And first I want to say, like, you're worthy above all else, regardless of what the scale shows. But Amanda, what would you want to tell somebody listening who might be having the same stuff going on right now?
I would say, well, first of all, it gets easier over time. So I remember when I was first deciding, okay, I'm going to recover, it felt impossible. It felt like I was I was going back and forth every day. But over time, like even when you're stepping on the scale, you don't have to step on the scale right away. I don't recommend it. But once you get the courage to do it again, because I do feel like for me, it was important for me to be able to one day, I didn't want to just completely avoid the scale, because I thought, okay, well, that's not overcoming my fears. I want to be able to be kind of like a normal person, where it's like when I step on the scale, maybe I don't always like the number, but it shouldn't ruin my day.
Right.
And so I would say over time, it does get easier. You get to a point where it's not like every single day you're struggling with, for me, for example, because it was bulimia, it was really hard for me to not go through a meal and like hold it down without throwing it up. But over time, like now that I'm like years into recovery, I feel like it doesn't even like cross my mind to throw up my food. So one of the things that I would say is it feels kind of like, oh, your life is going to be miserable, but it's actually going to be a million times better once you just finally commit to recovering. And it's just going to be a small window of time where it's uncomfortable. If you can get past that, you have all this whole beautiful life on the other side.
Yeah.
So I would say
food is so good, but it is one of those things that I do think that there's lots of different reasons why I think somebody might have a food insecurity or have an eating disorder. But I do think that a lot of it comes down to the feeling of worthiness, like feeling worthy of, like, maybe we see that in people's jobs, maybe like they're not doing well in their relationship or something. And so they go back and resort to an eating disorder to get control of feeling like, okay, I have worth from this. But I think it's so hard, and it's something that's not talked about, especially as adults. I feel like everyone believes that it is only an eating disorder for teenagers, and then you just grow out of it. But what people don't realize is that I think there's a lot more adults out there struggling with this, and they're silent. So when you said one of the things that you put down on the questionnaire is that a lot of people confuse the eating disorders that exist and how health is measured and the negative effects on the brain. Can you explain that to me? Like, what do we confuse the different types that exist? What are we misunderstanding about recovery? What is the impact on the brain and the behavior? What does that all look like?
So I know a lot of people just kind of automatically, when they think eating disorder, they think anorexia. And then but then there's anorexia, there's binge eating disorder, there's bulimia, there's different types. I can't remember the names of all the other ones, but I mean, the ones that I know the most about are like the ones that I kind of suffered with which was anorexia turned into bulimia. But I think a lot of people confuse that, or I know a lot of people, like they'll say, oh, you know, you're not like severely underweight. And that's kind of a dangerous one, because you can still be doing a lot of damage to your body. I know for me, I didn't have like, you know, I was never, thank God, never like in the hospital for anything severe, but I did have a lot of dental issues. I did have certain blood tests were coming out really low, like potassium, sugar. And then not only that, but there's certain like your internal organs, when you're throwing up that much, like that's terrible for your esophagus. Those are things that you might not know, like you might not get have any negative effects until like way down the line. But those are just kind of things. The other thing is that there's like a misconception as far as with bulimia. People think, oh, okay, or I was told like by some people that they're like, oh, you have your teeth, you're fine. Because, you know, when people think of bulimia, sometimes they think all your teeth fall out. That wasn't the case for me. I did have like several crowns, and then I would have to get like fillings redone, but all my teeth are real. So it's not like you're going to lose all your teeth overnight. Everybody kind of just, it depends, I guess, on like how your body reacts to what you're doing to it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of the misconceptions. And then emotionally, it was super taxing. I felt like when you're hungry and you're just kind of in a bad mood, that was just me 24/7. So I felt like I wasn't my best self. I'm not proud of, you know, how irritable I was, how rude I was. I felt that sometimes whenever I was upset at somebody, I would just post about it on social media instead of being more mature about it. And I don't know if that was necessarily just me in my 20s, but I also like to think that maybe it was just that I wasn't able to think as clear, because I was just so overwhelmed, and it was a tough time. Yeah.
And I think that first off, thank you for sharing that with me. Cause that's a lot. And I know, one of the things that I struggled with was, at first it was kind of like the binge eating thing, and then not eating for a few days. And then like, being really scared to eat because of my weight. And then it turned into full on just binge eating all the time, where I just ate my emotions away. And then, I would gain so much weight from that. Like I ended up being, and so I'm 5'8", weight wise, or no, well, not weight wise, height wise. But I ended up getting up to like 220 multiple times in my life. And it was really embarrassing, because it would be like I remember somebody coming in, and I was probably about 14 years old, and I was holding one of my baby brothers, who was just like maybe a couple months old. And I had gained a lot of weight because I was binge eating again. And someone looked at me and they're like, please tell me that's not your baby. And I was like, no, it's my brother, dum-dum. Like, I was so mad.
That's very rude to just say like that too.
I know. And I was like, thanks. Yeah, I know I gained weight, jerk. Like, rude. But then there were other moments in my life, like I would lose a bunch of weight, and then I'd get like super healthy. Well, there was a couple times I just lost weight, but then there was one other time that I did it in a healthy way. And then someone's like, what, are you just not eating? And then it was just like, okay, let me put on weight. And then it would be like, oh, look at you, got fat. And I'm like, oh my God, like I could never win when it came to these people. And that kind of was really frustrating, because it was just like, I have always been taught that healthy was skinny. That's not the truth. Just because you're skinny doesn't mean you're healthy emotionally, mentally, or physically. And you brought it up to where it's like, okay, look, like I had issues with my teeth because of it. I had a root canal done that's not, I don't think it's tied at all to, I just had a cavity that ended up breaking with stupid lobster down at the Yard House. I was so bad, because I was like eating a chip and I felt it.
Worth it?
It was worth it, but it's like, now I'm terrified to eat it. But I just got it fixed yesterday, and you're like, oh, that's funny that we're talking about that. And I was like, that's kind of funny that like, you experience that. And so I'm like, oh, but then you do think of like people who are like, well, that's like cavities are just genetic. And it's like, well, maybe it is, maybe it's not. But I do think that sometimes people are like, oh, if you were anorexic or you were bulimic and you were like making yourself throw up, you would be like a stick skeleton. And it's like, well, maybe not. Maybe you are overweight. Maybe you're not overweight. Maybe you look fine. You look healthy, but you're not. Now, you said that it also made you emotional and like irritable. And what was that like to be in that mindset, to look back on it now and be like, I'm clear mind, clear body. What is that like? What does that look like night and day wise?
I feel like a different person. I mean, I think overall I was nice, but I think I was pretty irritable, especially to people that I was close to, because whenever you're closer to somebody, like, okay, if I say this rude thing, they're not going to like, they're not going to leave. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's kind of sad to think of it that way, but I mean, I felt like I was also kind of more selfish because, all I cared about was like how bad I felt and how, I was struggling, and I felt sorry for myself at some point. So I was like, poor me, I'm going through this. And then so I almost felt like there was, the close people in my life, they would sometimes try to accommodate for me. And I feel like that wasn't good for them because, they deserve to be, their needs are important too.
Right. Right.
And it's nice kind of being older, and then not only being older, but just kind of being out of that whole like hurricane, and just being like, okay, it's learning from it. I think it humbles me to be able to admit, okay, I wasn't the best version of myself, but how can I be better now? And so it's nice being able to have, and lucky for me, all these people in my life, they stuck around. Like I said, I wasn't like awful, but I wasn't always nice.
You were nice, yeah. Like, we could look at our behavior and just be like, hey, that wasn't the best version of me, and I apologize. Yeah. But you did say before we jumped on the call, on the podcast episode, you did say that you noticed it during like, you said something about noticing it in your PhD program. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's
talk
about
fun
that.
to talk about. Yeah. So, it was during, it was maybe 2 or 3 years in to the PhD program. I think I knew from the very beginning, I knew, okay, in order for me to make it through this program, because this is a very stressful program, I need to be the healthiest version of myself. And so I think I knew that I was going into this program from the very beginning. I knew I was going to walk out without the eating disorder. So I think I knew that for sure. Because I knew I was going to it was going to get to a point where I was going to be like, okay, did I go through this whole program? And not only that, but like health wise, I didn't want to end up like doing something to my health where I was like not physically able to finish, or my doctor would say like, hey, you can't do this. You got to focus on your health. Because I knew I would Google the dangers of bulimia. So I knew like what could happen, what couldn't happen. I knew technically you could die from it, like like kind of out of nowhere because of the electrolyte imbalance. So you could be like throwing up and then just pass away. And so I think that was kind of scaring me a little bit. Yeah, it is. So so I was thinking, okay, I don't want that to happen. Like I don't want to get this far in the program, and then just that's the reason why I couldn't finish. So that was one of the reasons. And then it's kind of funny because the number one thing, the thing that like motivated me like at that moment that I decided, okay, I'm going to get out of this is I was in one of my classes and I was about to fail the class. And I remember my professor was telling me, or it was my chair, she was saying, if you fail the class, we just keep going. At the end of the day, the F doesn't matter. And it was just because I wasn't going to meet this milestone that I had to meet. And then I remember when I failed the class, I was devastated. But then it made me realize it kind of took away that high expectation that I always had for myself, that I had to be perfect. I had to get these like straight A's. I had to do this and that. And so I think for me, it was a realization that like, okay, I failed. I'm still, and I felt still like worth something. And so I think for me, that moment was just kind of like it's okay for things to be messy. It's okay for things to not be perfect. And so then that was it didn't happen that day, but maybe like a week or two later was when I decided, okay, I'm going to stop throwing my food up and it's going to be hard. And I remember another thing is that whenever when you're recovering from like binging and purging, you kind of retain a lot of water. So my face was like super puffy. I felt like I was puffy in a lot of places just because your body's just trying to like rebalance those electrolytes out. I found that out through my doctor, like later on down the line, because I was kind of checking in with my doctor frequently just to make sure nothing was getting too thrown off.
Yeah.
But I do remember at one point there was a girl that went up to me and she was like, Amanda, you're not skinny anymore. And that freaked me out. Because I was thinking the whole time, like, okay, maybe it's just in my head. Maybe nobody notices. But I'm really happy she said that, because as rude as it was, I felt like that was an emotional like point of growth for me, because I'm the type of person where I want to be able to handle things. So I want to be able to say, okay, somebody can comment negatively on my body and it's not going to change me. It's not going to make me go back to old habits. So I'm very big on like, I want to grow as a person. I want this to make me stronger. So as rude as that was, I'm happy she said it.
Yeah. Amanda's like, I punched her, but we're fine now.
We're friends still.
We're friends. It's fine. I did punch her in the face. But what in that moment, it was like, ooh, ouch, that stings. But what it did not do was it didn't derail you to where you were like, and we're back to square one. Because it could have, like you said, that's a moment where you're like, wow, I've really grown. Thank God. But like, holy crap, girl.
Yeah.
Like, and so you were 15 when it started, and you went all the way to 28.
28.
And how old are you now?
I'm 30.
30. So 2 years.
Yeah.
And what I don't think people realize is like, let's go down to the worthy part, because when it comes to the grade, your chair, if people don't know what a chair is, in your dissertation process, it's a professor who walks you through your research and approves it and all that stuff. So the chair took a moment to say, it's okay if you have an F. It doesn't mean anything. You just keep going. Yeah. You're not starting over. And that had to be settling emotionally and mentally first. Yeah. Because if she would have been like, well, we'll have to talk about it, you would have probably freaked out. But she was just like, we're just going to keep going. Like, no big. Like, you're good.
Yeah.
And I think that perfect. Thank God for that chair. But it's this moment of you conflated worthiness with grades. And then weight with worthiness. And so the issue wasn't the weight or the grades. It was the issue of not feeling worthy of whatever that looked like, success or prettiness or whatever. But it's surprising to me how many people will comment on somebody's weight.
Yeah.
Like,
it's kind of crazy. I thought it was obvious that that's like a no-go. Like I never comment on anyone's weight.
I thought it was a no-go.
Yeah. Because you never know what somebody's going through.
It's insane to me. Like, I had my daughter. We had her at 6.5 weeks early. And a ton of people were commenting on how fast I lost the weight, but it was due to stress. And she was in the NICU for 12 days. But then like other women around me were hearing that who had not lost their baby weight or like did not lose it quickly. And they were getting upset because they were just like, can you stop commenting on her body? Because it's also making me feel bad. And I was just like, can people stop commenting on my body? Because I'm actually losing the weight too quickly and I'm scared.
Yeah.
And then I was okay. Like I was fine. But even my doctor was like, hey, if you lose any more, I need you to tell me because we need to start running blood work. Because you're losing it very quickly. But she said really what she thought, my doctor thought what was going on was that because we had her so early, I didn't even get to 40 weeks. I would have probably gained another 5 or 6 pounds or I don't even know. But because it was like the stress of having her early, my body kind of just got rid of it. But I was underweight, but you couldn't tell because I was swollen and pregnant from the high blood pressure. So it was kind of like I was just swollen and the swelling went down, but I was actually underweight because I wasn't eating, like I was eating a ton, but my body was burning it because I was pregnant. But it was one of those things that actually made me uncomfortable, that people were like, look how fast you lost it. And I was like, I know, but like, and then I kind of just maintained my weight, which was fine. But it was an insecurity for me because it was like, well, what if I get too big during my pregnancy? And so I was afraid that my eating disorder would come back during my pregnancy because of how afraid I was of gaining weight. And then I was okay. during, like, I just ate healthy and that was good. But then I was like, man, I'm eating pasta all the time because I'm so freaking hungry all the time, because that's just reality. But I know a lot, for some women, it comes back during pregnancy or high stress moments, like a degree.
Exactly.
So what advice would you give to someone on that? Go ahead.
It's really hard. So it's really hard because now that when you mentioned all that, I was thinking of the people that I know that have gotten pregnant, and a month after they had the baby, people were telling me, "Oh, they haven't lost the baby weight yet," and I'm like, "What do you expect? They shouldn't lose it yet because
screw off."
That, that is so dangerous. Or or like even
it is emotional.
It is. I have a friend who's pregnant right now, and people keep commenting on her weight, and I'm like, she's pregnant.
Like, leave her alone. Her body's doing exactly what it needs to do. Leave her alone. And then, it's heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking.
It is. And then that's why it's hard, especially for us women, is that, of course, we're going to think of our value and our weight because everyone's just saying it. And it's kind of hard. And I almost feel like people will comment on your weight if you're somebody that fluctuates more often. And and I'm just like,
they do.
Yeah, because I mean, I think all women we fluctuate, but especially like with all the different time periods that we go in life, like pregnancy and just stress. Stress can cause weight gain or weight loss, and it's really hard to just tune people out. But I think I don't even like to tune people out, actually. Like anytime anyone's ever commented on my weight, I just try to take it in. Sometimes I'll just kind of, talk myself through it. But I like to feel the pain because I feel like it's important to process like the human emotion of, hey, this is hurtful.
Yes.
Instead of trying to like brush it off.
Right.
But then I also try to use it as an opportunity for me to become stronger and to remind myself like, hey, this comment's not going to break me. This was, a rude comment. And like, I know myself, I know my weight is fine. Like it's not like dangerously going up or anything like that. And even if it is, there's so many health factors. Like some people have thyroid problems. And it's, and then certain culture was like, for me, I'm like, I'm half Filipino. So they comment on our weight. I have a really good family actually, but I know like sometimes they would comment on like my cousin's weight, and it's unfortunate. It just makes
everybody feel
I just don't understand like why some people think it's okay. I've never, like I mentioned, I've never commented on anybody's weight at all because it's irrelevant.
I've never met a woman who liked someone commenting on their weight ever.
Yeah.
That's the moral of the story. Like really, none of us like it. But I love that Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, even when you comment like positively on somebody's weight, then it puts in their brain, oh, this is the expectation. I have to stay this weight. Otherwise, they're going to comment if it goes up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
and there's a different, like, I think there was someone who, a friend of mine, she used to just be like, you look really pretty today to people. And people started getting really offended by it. Because it was like, she would only say, you look really pretty today when they dressed up. So it was like, and she goes, dang, you look good. Like, so what what we started doing was we started just being like, hey, you look good. It's like, okay, I look like Adam Sandler. Like, I looked a mess in my clothes. And like, my husband does it. He's like, dude, you look good. And I was just like, I look like a potato sack. And he's just like, no. And I'm like, okay, now, okay, I look in the mirror. I definitely look like I don't want to look. But then like when someone comments only when I look good, it does make me feel like that I look like really bad. But I used to do a lot of like youth leading for a church, and I noticed around middle school because we used to say it to kids all the time. It's like, oh, you got so big, and in middle school is when they started to think it was weight. And so I'm just always like, man, you look so grown up today. And so I had to change that. With middle schoolers, because it was definitely something that they were taking. They're like, what do you mean? Do I look fat? And I'm like, no, like you just grew up. And so I started changing it to that because it was I understood that some people were taking it differently. But you said something else where you said that you started to feel it. So there's someone I was listening to. Her name's Jeanette McCarty. She's the writer of I'm Glad My Mom Died. She played on like iCarly and stuff like
I know
that.
her.
And
I
she
book.
said, I want to read that book. I'm a little scared, but I want to read it. But she was in an interview and she said one of the things that she started to do was intellectually talk herself out of how she felt. So she would have the feeling and be like, this is why you shouldn't feel like this. This is why you can't feel like this. This is and she kept going instead of feeling the emotion. And she's like, do you know how worse I made myself feel because I kept trying to talk myself out of these feelings versus just feeling it. I made it go longer. And so for you to say, like, I'm glad that this person said it to me, not that I'm glad that they said it to me because I saw the amount of growth, but I let myself be like, oh, that hurt. Versus being like, and you're fine. Don't think that. Don't bully yourself. No. Like we're just like, you know what? That hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And I would love to get to the point where sometimes I'll do it where I'm like, that was rude. And like to the person, but then be like, no, I understand what you were trying to say, but the way that it came across was not very nice. You know?
Yeah.
But I think sometimes people are like, no, I don't want to fight with you. I'm like, I'm not trying to fight. I'm just trying to help you become more aware of your words.
Right.
That they do have a meaning to it. But then there's times that I think that I look at people's words and I assume that like they're purposely trying to hurt my feelings, and they're not. They were trying to compliment me, but they don't know how to compliment.
Yeah, there you go.
That like sometimes I look for the offense, and so I have to like filter that as saying, am I just wanting to be offended by their words? And that I'm really trying to work through, because still I'm 35 and I still like sometimes I'm like, oh, we're going to fight today. Like that's not great. So what advice would you have for me when it comes to like maybe the thing that someone said, if I came to you and I was like, hey, Amanda, like I'm struggling with this again. Someone said this about me. What way can you walk me through like not letting that impact me?
Well, I relate to how you feel, because I feel like I'm the type of person where when somebody says something, I like to analyze it, and I'm like, and then I turn it into like they were being rude. Sometimes they are being rude. Sometimes they're just, sometimes it's straight up rude. Like,
okay, Karens.
Sometimes they're the problem, but what I've been really trying to think of everything as is like an experience for me to get stronger. So anytime somebody says something rude, or you know, for me, I'm like, okay, you know what? They said it. The world didn't stop. Everything's still going. I'm still here, and you know, and I just realized I could handle it. And so I think it's kind of a nice way to just realize like how resilient we are, how we can handle things. Not that, you know, we deserve to be talked to that way, but it's, it's just, you know, it builds our character. So that's kind of what I would say. Just kind of like
it does build our character to like say, no, you don't get to impact me with that.
Exactly.
Like that like, I don't know if maybe you need to say that to the person and be like, ooh, that's not impacting me today. Like, no,
not today.
Or just like walk away and be like, I'm not going to let this break the progress I've made. Yeah. Because it's like, I don't know why a bubble just came up.
That's funny.
That's great. But it is something that's hard. I think it's easier said than done when I'm in my emotions.
Same.
But I have to like, sometimes it takes me a couple of days to be like, you know what, maybe what they said was more about them than me. Yeah. Maybe they're feeling insecure about their weight. Maybe that's why they feel the need to call me out on it. That's actually something that a friend of mine years ago was just like, I really hate when people are like, hey, are you sick? Because you look sick today. And so that one pisses me off every time where I'm like, no, I just forgot to put makeup on.
Right.
And I told someone once, I was like recently, they're like, are you okay? You look kind of sick. And I was like, no, I just forgot to put my face on. And this is just how my face looks today.
I'm like, no, I'm just tired today.
So I've realized how that hurt me. So I started changing how I said it to somebody else, is that if their eyes look tired, I'm just like, hey, your eyes look tired today. Are you okay? Yeah. And most of the time they're like, actually, no, I've been crying the last couple hours, or like, no, I didn't sleep last night. But I never go like, hey, are you okay? Your face looks a lot like messed up. Like, no.
Like, you look horrible today.
It's like you look like you feel like you've had a bad day. And it's like the hard part was there was one day that I felt really great. I just didn't put any makeup on. Yeah. And that didn't help because I was like, I feel great actually. But then there was times that I was really, really sick and someone's like, are you sure? I was doing a couple recording sessions and someone's like, are you sure you don't want to go fix your face and try to make yourself look a little better? And I was like, I just,
oh my gosh,
I was really sick, but I like record. It was a really great conversation. It was fine, but it left like a sting in my brain because I was just like, okay, so I can't show up sick. And then I had to change that because that was not what the person said. The person didn't say like, hey, like you shouldn't show up when you're sick. It was just like, are you sure you don't need a minute? Yeah. And I took that as like, oh, she thinks I'm ugly. And I'm like, but I look back at the video and I'm like, I did not look good. But I was like, you know what? It's being posted though. I looked at like, there was a couple of videos where you could hear it in my voice where I'm just like, oh, you are sick. And that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. But I think
it's all about being raw
so
real.
much. Yeah, just be raw and real. But like, I think sometimes we internalize way too much what someone says.
Exactly.
And maybe they're not even saying as much as what we feel. But this is where we have to be very careful of not to go backwards to an addiction. And it is an addiction when it comes to like an eating disorder. It's an addiction of being in control of something and finding worthiness in that. Right. So what would you tell me if I was like, okay, I'm coming back and like maybe it's not me, maybe it's like, Amanda, I have a friend who's going through this, and like what can I tell her to encourage her that this is not a healthy, outside of just like, because sometimes people are like, the health risks won't get me, like we think we're invincible. So what would you walk me through to walk my friend through this?
You know, that one's a little bit hard because I know so many people tried to get through to me. Because I went to therapy. I saw a nutritionist that specialized in eating disorders, and it all kind of came down to no one could really help me. I had to like get to a point where I was like, okay, I need to prove to myself what true worthiness is. So I think it's actually once they get to a point where they find out what they're worthy, like realizing, okay, my worthiness isn't the number on the scale. My worthiness is I'm worthy enough to recover from this. That's kind of just once they get to that point of realization, once they truly want to recover, that's when I think it's going to happen. And it's kind of interesting that you were talking a lot about control, because I feel like it's funny because with we try to control our eating habits, but in reality, it's like we're the most out of control because
isn't that crazy? And that's with most addictions.
Yeah.
When we have an addiction, we think that we're in control of it, which is why like people are like, I'm in control. I can stop whenever I want to. And exactly. You realize when they're out of it, you realize just how out of control it was.
Yeah.
And you're like, dang, like that's crazy to me. Not crazy, and then in a crazy sense. But
no, I get it. And then you realize like, okay, once you're like out of the eating disorder, you realize how much more in control you are, because you realize, okay, I'm going to be able to control tolerating these negative like words. Like if somebody like comments negatively on my weight, I'm in control of how I react to it. So it's nice.
It is nice to have that control. And I think that the biggest thing is, the only thing that we're really in control of, and it's not me saying this, I'm not super wise, but they said the only thing that we can control is our response to what happens.
And that's
we
so
might
powerful.
not be, it like that was game changer for me, because one of my very, very, very first professors when I was like 19 or 20 years old said, you know, you can't control what happened to you from your parents before you were 18, but after 18 you're in the driver's seat, so how are you going to change it? And I was just like, dang, like this guy's just dropping knowledge to a class. I felt like he was only talking to me, but he wasn't. But it is that thing is like, how are you going to control only what you can actually control is your response. Like you don't have to let your response ruin your life. And I think it is a good thing that we're talking about this, because with eating disorders, there are a lot of things that you cannot see internally that is impacting, and it can lead to other issues. And I think that that's very scary. So when you found out, because you said like it didn't really matter, I was in therapy, I saw a nutritionist, what was it that made you kind of like, okay, we're done now?
You know, actually it was, you know, on top of like school, and how like I realized, okay, I realized that it was okay to fail and to like quote unquote fail. I was also going through a breakup at that time, And then I remember when I went through that breakup, I felt so worthless because of the things that my ex-boyfriend said to me. And then I remembered, I was like, you know what? I got to prove to myself that I'm worth it. And so it was almost when I finally realized, okay, I'm going to start working on like being on my own team versus working against me. So that was super helpful. So sometimes it's kind of nice to have like failures, breakups.
Yeah, because it wakes you up a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But I think being okay, can you re-say that? You have to realize that we're on our own team. Say that again.
Oh yeah, that I was, on my own team versus like working against myself. I think that's what I said.
Yeah. And I think that like that's super powerful because it's just like, wow, like when I'm doing these things to myself, if I'm talking to myself negatively, if I'm doing things like portraying and like trying to control my weight in a horrible way and not in a healthy way, if I'm beating myself up over my grades, if I'm putting myself in relationships or friendships that are not good, like I'm against me on my own team. Like I'm team captain. And I'm like sabotaging my own self. Like,
exactly.
How do I fix that? Yeah. Like, dang, like, come on, let's fix it. But I think sometimes it feels like you said in the beginning where it felt so much bigger than what it was. And like that you were like, I deserve to get through this and deserve to be on the other side. Because it's kind of like, going through a PhD, you're like, I should not have to get to this point just to be done. Like, I did not just go through all this school just to let my body fail. Because of the choices I've made.
Exactly,
so, that's so wild. I love that. Do you have anything else you would like to add?
I don't know, but I really like all the topics that we covered. Yeah.
Yes. I think it is really, really, really important for anybody that's listening right now to understand that like your worth is not in your grades. It's not in your weight. It's not in the way that you look or talk. It is you as a human being. You are worthy by yourself. It's not how you sound. It's not the job titles that you have. It's not the degrees that are behind your name. Like those are just extra things in life. But really your worthiness comes down to you being who you are and not what you think people want you to be. But I think that's where a lot of us get into an addictive personality is that we are like, well, I need to control things and I can't feel worthy. And sometimes worthiness comes down to not feeling a purpose, like we have purpose in this life. And other times, our worthiness feels like we're not lovable. And you are loved and you are worthy and you do have a purpose. So whatever that might be, you guys can reach out to both Amanda and I and just ask questions. You can put comments down. You can email if you guys want to reach out personally, you can. But like this is such an important topic and I don't think that this gets talked about after high school. But it does start in middle school and high school. And so parents have the conversation with your kids, be there. And I think really the important thing is if you're walking with someone who has had an eating disorder, just know that we just have to be there for them throughout it. And there might not be anything that you can do or try that will stop them right now. But hopefully by being there with them through it all, you get to see them on the other side of it. Thank you so much, Amanda, for joining. This was a really good conversation.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you so much.
Yeah. If you guys have questions, reach out and we'll go from there. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you.